Take two 700mm lengths of 0.5mm natural thread and tie them just inboard of the blocks to make the gear fails. Take 600mm of the same thread and tie it to the centre of the yard to make the yard sling. Leave a 250mm tail on one side and 350mm on the other. The knot does not need to be sealing. Gently lay the yard across the model ahead of the foremast with the tails running neatly to the front. Start to lash the double blocks on the yard to the treble blocks just below the foretop using the gear fails that you fitted in step 4. Raise the yard until there is a gap of about 25mm between the top of the yard and the bottom of the foretop and tighten the lashings. The blocks will be very close or may even touch. The ends of the yard sling through the eye of the forestay and up through the front hole in the foretop. Take the longer end and feed this up behind the brass eye bolt in the foremast cap, then across the aftmost groove in the foremast cap and down behind the brass eye bolt on the other side of the cap. Now tie the two ends of the sling together. Use the short end to tie a half hitch around the longer end. Slide the knot up until the sling is tight, then secure it by tying a half hitch in the longer end. Adding the parel. Start by taking two lengths of 0.25mm natural thread, each 600mm long. Tie the two threads together about 250mm from one end. Slide 10 of the B-shaped metal ribs on the longer tails, interspaced with black beads, keeping the beads the same way up. Then tie the threads together to secure the assembly. Tie the shorter end of the parel around the yard just inboard of the gear fall on one side. Feed the parel around the mast, making sure that the straight sides of the ribs face inward. Tie the other side of the parel to the yard inboard of the gear fall opposite to step 3. Seal and trim the ends. That the yard is fitted, secure the gearfails to the forward pin rail post. Take the thread through the inner slot before securing it to the post with 1 or 2 half hitches. Seal and trim the threads. Rigging the foreyard. Tie a double block supplied with stage 96 to the end of the yard, leaving a 50mm tail. This is the yard tackle pendant. Cut a 700mm length of 0.25mm natural thread and tie one end to the eye bolt holding the block behind the 5th and 6th dead eyes. This is the inner tricing line F. Use the inner tricing line to lash the yard tackle pendant to the chainrail block and tie the end of the line around the base of the 6th dead eye. Repeat steps 1 to 3 on the other side of the model. Fit the lifts. Take 800mm of 0.25mm thread and tie one end to the eye of the foremast cap. Take the other end through the shrouds towards the tip of the yard. You will have to use your trial and error to find which gap in the shrouds gives the threads a straight pull. Feed the thread through the block on the end of the yard, and take the thread back through the shrouds and through the block on the mast cap. Then run the thread down through the front end of the hole in the side of the foretop. Feed the thread down behind the yard and tie it to the bit just aft of the carronade. Wrap the thread around the bit a couple of times and finish off with a half hitch or 2. Repeat steps 4 to 7 on the other side of the model and tension both threads at the same time so that the blocks on the mast cap are even. Follow step 8 to make the braces. Now tie both blocks to the mainstay close to the main mast stop. Feed the end of one thread through the single block on the end of the yard. Then feed the thread back through the block fitted to the mainstay. Feed the thread through the outer slot in the mainmast pin rail post and secure it to the top of the post. Repeat steps 10 to 12 on the other side. Fitting the foretop yard. Use 0.25mm natural thread to tie the foot ropes or horses to the yard. The yard is supported on port and starboard types rigged as shown on the right of your instructions on page 609. Tie the 150mm thread to the rearmost eye bolt on the forward chainwell, which already has the royal backstay attached. You will need to release the aft two dead eyes. The single block should be about 23 to 30mm above the chainwell. Feed the 600mm thread through the left hole in the large double block below the cross trees. Leave the 5mm hole block on the other end hanging down the side of the mast. Now hold the yard roughly in position and feed the end of the 600mm thread through the left hand hole in the double block on the yard. Pull the thread through both blocks until the 5mm double block on the other end is roughly in line with the cath pins on the four mast shrouds. Lash the lower 4mm and upper 5mm blocks together using 0.25mm threads so that the upper block will sit a little away from the cath pins, about 150mm above the deck. Pull the free end of the tie to raise the yard until the two blocks touch, then tie off the end of the tie to the top mast above the shrouds. Repeat steps 4 to 10 on your instructions on the other side of the model, then tension both ties with the lashings and tie them off to the eye bolt that is second from the rear. Make the parel in the same way as you did in stage 105, but this time use 6 of the dice cast metal ribs. Tie the parel to the yard and around the mast in the same way as you did with the foreyard. To make the lifts, take an 850mm length of 0.25mm natural thread and tie one end to the eye on the top mast cap. Take the thread down through the block on the end of the yard, then take the thread back up through the block on the mast cap. Now take the thread down and tie it off to the second shroud. Repeat steps 11 to 14 in your instructions on the other side of the model. You can now seal and trim all the dead-eye lashings on the foremast chainwell. Rigging the braces. Prepare port and starboard braces as shown in step 1. Then use the short ends of the thread to tie both blocks to the mainstay just above the block carrying the foreyard braces. Take the long ends up through the single blocks in the ends of the yard and then back to the blocks just fitted. Take the threads through their blocks and down to the deck. Tie the two heads off to the second from middle pins on the cockpit pin rail.